Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Star Rail, and in today's video, we're one day away. I'm a bit late doing this video, and I'm sorry about that. But we're going to talk about Aventurine coming up, why I'm pulling for him, and yeah, basically why I think he's such high value, particularly from a new player's perspective on a new account, right? A fairly new account. We will stick in some of Braxophone's footage here in the background. I think he said it was cool to like use the footage to react to it and stuff like that. So that will just give you some context in terms of just sort of how powerful Aventurine is looking. So we'll sort of touch back on this as we go. Thought it was a great video. I'll actually link it in the description down below so you can see it. We probably have already, but hey, it will be there if you haven't. Yeah, let's touch on this real quick. Certainly from a new player perspective, like I joined, I think sort of halfway through or near the end of the Black Swan build. We had Black Swan, Imbibitor Lunae in there. Then after that, we had Sparkle and Jing Yuan. And it's not until now with Luocha in there that we finally have a 5-star sustain, right? With a 5-star abundance in Luocha. And I think that is still probably a huge recommendation that people give is to try get 1 to 2 5-star limited sustains as quickly as possible, that they are going to make perhaps the biggest difference to your account and letting you push up and survive and higher stuff. And I certainly think, let's actually touch on point number 1 for why I think Aventurine is really high value, which is, it seems to me that the limited preservation characters are more valuable to a new account than the limited abundance characters. So for instance, Luocha versus Aventurine is actually a pretty good comparison. They're both good with follow-up teams, right? Because the extra attacks triggers more Luocha's healing. More follow-up attacks triggers Aventurine's follow-up attack, which triggers more shielding. So it's very similar. They're both imaginary. They both attack a lot. They're very, very similar. A huge difference for me is, though, the 4-star options. What are your good 4-star options for solo sustain preservation? Yeah, it's really not easy on a new account. Like, you've got March 7th. She uses a lot of skill points. It's actually, we'll talk about that. Just preservation in general. Same thing with the Fire Trailblazer, which obviously locks you out of using other Trailblazers. But their preservation, again, I did use them for a good chunk at the start of the game, obviously. And again, they eat through your skill points super fast. It's not easy. And the amount of shielding they do for your whole team, it's difficult to actually keep them alive. Whereas for Abundance, you've got Lynx, who's quite decent. You've got Gallagher now in the recent patch, who's quite decent. So you've got 2. Even Natasha can do it. I think it's just easier, much easier, to use the 4-star abundance options than it is to use the 4-star preservation, which then pushes when the preservation 5-star limited are equal enough to the 5-star abundance limited. It makes the preservation ones more attractive because you can build a different kind of team. You can build a team with high effective max HP. That's something I want to touch on next with Aventurine. I honestly think like the 5-star preservation limited are probably a little bit overpowered in this game. And sort of point number 2, right? If you look at the size of the shields, right? And that's sort of why I wanted the gameplay footage to show it. Obviously, we got to play with Aventurine during the 2.1 story a little bit, so you'll have a sense from that. But like, he's pumping out pretty consistently very, very big shields. It is just hard. It is just hard for actual damage to go in your characters. I think in some of this gameplay, like at one point, he did have some characters start to fall off a little bit. But if you think about it, like, look at the size of these shields and these characters. In order for those shields to be broken, they have to be hit extremely hard. And again, you can only be hit so hard in the first place, because if you get hit hard enough to basically one-shot a character and destroy a shield that's doubling their health bar, like a squishy character like Dr. Ratio, well, if you're in with an abundance character, if they get hit that hard, they're probably just one-shot and dead. Like, you can only get hit so hard in the first place, and that's sort of what preservation characters are good at dealing with, is upping your effective max HP. Instead of having 3,000 HP, you've got more like, I don't know, 5,000, right? Because you've got a big, massive extra shield, or you've got damage reduction coming in from Fushuan. That's, so it's difficult for characters, it seems to me from watching the gameplay, to actually take enough damage. I think that's his weakness. We will touch on that. What is the weakness of Aventurine with his shielding style? I think he's very good against AoE, right? Because every time these AoEs hit your team, it's building up his follow-up attacks, which is regenerating more shields. So he really thrives against AoE. I think he will be weaker against high, sustained, single target damage, where one person just keeps getting hit again and again and again. I do believe his follow-up attack generates twice the amount of shields for whoever has the lowest amount of shields or is the weakest health mate. I can't remember exactly. So he's got a little bit of single target support there, but a lot of his value is coming from protecting your team. So he will struggle at keeping like one particular person alive. That will be his weakness, I think, moving forwards. But now I do it genuinely seems so powerful, right? It really, really does. I've especially coming from other games, shielding is really strong. Like I've got a lot of history with World of Warcraft, for instance, and if anyone remembers like Spirit Shell Discipline Priests, I played that like in Castle Nathria a lot. Like you guys know how insane all damage reduction and damage prevention is. It's just strong because again, if you get hit with an abundance character, you might have to take a turn, or your allies have to take a turn to heal up a bit. It can take time. You're in more danger of being killed straight up. You're very safe from being killed straight up when you've got a massive shield, and it's gonna take, from what I see from the game right now, it will take a long time for enemies to actually bust through that shield and get damage in onto your character, and then the shield gets reapplied. They got to bust through again and do a little bit of damage to actually wear your health bar down and kill somebody. Like I said, it seems pretty tough. Single target is where I think his weakness will be in the future, but we'll see. So, for example, Uocha, with his passive, right, where he does a massive single target heal on someone that drops really low, he would probably be a better option for single target stuff if that comes up. But, I mean, like, right now you can see, like, the AoE protection, the shielding from Aventurine is just kind of nuts. Another weakness. So, this is specifically about Aventurine. He seems to circumvent, to me, what are two fundamental problems with shielding and damage prevention in general, which is kind of insane. Number one, they're both sort of the same two sides of the same coin, shall we say, or two facets of the same diamond. That's maybe more more appropriate for the Aventurine analogies. But with shielding, let's say you see it with March 7th, for instance. When I play with March 7th during the story, right? You have to spend skill points for the shield. If that shield doesn't get attacked, she has to keep pumping out the skill points. It can be quite costly. You got to pump out the shields. It costs you stuff. Aventurine can do it like small amounts of shields for sure with just his follow-up attacks. It doesn't cost you that much. But March 7th, her shields expire. That's one of the big weaknesses of the shield, right? You have to spend resources to get the shield up preemptively before the damage happens, and then if the damage doesn't happen or it goes somewhere else or whatever, you've spent resources that have now expired. They're not doing anything for you anymore. So that's a loss, right? You spent resources and you got nothing actually useful back. Aventurine doesn't have that problem because his follow-up attack, which triggers very frequently, as you can see from the gameplay stuff that we've seen in the background, that seems to refresh the duration of all of his shields. So his shields never seem to run out, which is a huge power boost. I mean, I think even Fu Xuan is a similar thing. Every couple of turns, she has to spend the skill points to refresh her damage reduction on the team. And again, if you don't take much damage in those 2 turns, then it's no good. But you've got the risk then. If you don't put it up, if you take the gamble and say, I don't think there's a big attack coming, but then it does come, you'll just get hit and die. That's the downside of preservation, right? You have to be preemptive, and you can waste resources being preemptive. Aventurine doesn't seem to have that problem, which is nuts because of his extending the shield duration. So that's a pretty massive thing, honestly, in his favor. That's kind of absurd. Like, he sort of counters one of the weaknesses, it seems to me. Actually, another little tip, another thing here. We saw Yang Xing in the background. Hopefully I said the name right. But I think with Yang Xing, that's a 5-star character, not limited. One from the standard banner that you can pull. And for a new player, he seems to be considered by far the worst, right? Because whenever he takes any damage, he loses his special buff, which lets him do way more damage. That's a big problem. Aventurine makes him good. Maybe Japard makes him good as well, but Japard's another another 5-star character that certainly I don't have, you might not have. So yeah, I think Aventurine more than anyone else makes Yang Xing good, which is a pretty big deal for a new player, right? You get Yang Xing from one of your 5-star pulls, you're going, without Aventurine, this guy is so difficult to use, it's kind of a dead pull. Aventurine, I don't know, he might make him actually pretty decent for Memory of Chaos. and filling in your ice weakness. If you don't have a Jing Liu, which she's running alongside Aventurine, you might not be able to afford it. Let's also talk broadly. Fu Xuan is up here as well. That's a good point too. For me, it's probably the biggest point for pulling Aventurine versus Luocha versus the other. Actually, that's a great little screen to pause on versus the other characters in here, right? We talked about the 4-star abundance for me being a swaying factor, but Fu Xuan, right? She is due a rerun really, really soon. So that's coming up soon. So for me, one of the big reasons to pull for Aventurine, I really like him. You know, I didn't like him when I first met him in the story. I was like, okay, this guy seems like a bit of a prick, honestly. But he really grew on me. I think he had the best story. I thought the story was maybe like 30% too long. They could have cut it down a bit, right? But apart from that, like, man, his story is just a phenomenal story. He has so much character and characterization. Like he just really stands out just in, you know, in these types of games, just in games in general. He's a brilliant character with a really interesting story. Yeah, I think he's super fun. I love personally, actually, we didn't mention this. I should have a script for this, so I'm more structured. Combos really well, very appropriately, with the free Doctor Ratio, right? Everybody has a free Doctor Ratio. That's a big deal for a new player because he's a very good at Memory of Chaos, like single target damage dealer. With follow-up attacks, he synergizes really well with Aventurine. Really, really well. And like I said, it's appropriate because, man, they had a great story together. Very, very spicy in 2.1. So yeah, I love his story. I think his character is cool. I love his animations as well. I think he's just flashy. He's stylish. Now, if you hate him, though, if you can't stand Aventurine, like I said, Fu Xuan is coming up soon. Probably very soon. She's really, really, really due a rerun. So you can absolutely wait and grab Fu Xuan instead. If you really want someone that's maybe a bit more focused on the follow-up attack teams, like it's like, again, these are very, very small things. I think all of the 5-star sustains are very capable, very capable. The differences between them, I think, are generally actually exaggerated. I think there's small differences though, like obviously Aventurine with his follow-up, getting more stacks for his follow-up attack from other follow-up attacks. He works, you know, he's best with follow-up teams. Which maybe leans with a little bit of a bias towards hunt characters, but I mean, you've got Blade with a follow-up attack and destruction. They're a bit more limited, obviously. I think that's about the only follow-up attack there, I think. A few Erudition characters have follow-up attacks. So, like, I'm planning to use Aventurine probably with a Herta for not simulated universe, but for pure fiction, right? Where my account's not strong enough to go in with no sustain there, which would ultimately be the goal, I suppose. But, you know, he's going to be great with the follow-up attacks from Erudition. But Hunt is really, I think, where follow-up attacks are strongest. So he's probably the ideal sustain for that. But, you know, all the other sustains can work just fine. But that's sort of his small niche. It's a small thing. Fu Xuan, she seems quite general with boosting up crit. Maybe she's sort of the best for Erudition, which tend to be a little bit lacking in crit stats. So she helps Erudition, but again, she's so general. We saw when we did a breakdown for Luocha's video that she is by far the most used sustain, or she was, at least when we looked at it for Memory of Chaos at the time. She was the most used sustain. Also really good with Mono Quantum, because she's Quantum, of course. Huahua, particularly good with Nihility, like with dot units, because she can boost energy and attack with her ultimate. So again, that's very flexible, but she's particularly good there. And then Luocha, I think, is particularly good with destruction units. Who are taking extra turns, so more hits to proc his, his extra healing from his aura, and yeah, I mean, like he's good skill point positivity for Embauder Lune and all that sort of stuff. So I think he works pretty well. But again, they're all very general, but they're sort of the minor flavors for each character. I think Aventurine as a follow-up focused character sort of fits well with the characters they're releasing at the moment. We do have a Topaz rerun due soon enough as well. I've heard that Robin is going to be a good harmony for follow-up. And Dr. Ratio is the big one. If you got a Dr. Ratio, you obviously get Herta. You've got a couple of really solid follow-up characters for free. Very, very free to play friendly characters in terms of getting them. That he will synergize well with. And that's, yeah, I think that's a big thing. If you do have a Japard, I think its value isn't as strong because Japard's a really good shielder as well. But I think Aventurine is still an upgrade. For me, I'm in the opposite seat where I have a Bailu who's actually built. So for me, that sort of pushes the abundance characters down a bit. and really raises the value of the preservation. But yeah, I honestly feel like either one of these is any of the 5-star limited abundance are honestly totally good. They're totally fine to pick. I think Aventurine does stand out to me. For me, I'm going for him on my account because I like the character a ton. He's sick, he's cool, and I do think that he is particularly good with follow-up teams. And yeah, I think he's strong. I really do. I personally would have a strong advice. Yeah, not strong advice. Yeah, I would actually pretty strongly advise new players to really consider the 5-star preservation characters as being good. I didn't even mention, I accidentally said simulated universe earlier, but Aventurine I think is going to be a pretty hard carry through the difficult I haven't even done many of them really yet. Haven't had the time. I've still been doing quests. I'm trying to get to Trailblaze 65 so I can get some relics, you know? Actually bother grinding some Caverns of Corrosion. I think there's a triple event or double event for them coming up soonish. Because he's pumping out shields, he works super well with the preservation blessings in Simulated Universe, which I believe Fu Xuan cannot take full advantage of because she doesn't do shields. So a lot of the preservation blessings don't work with her. They do with him. So like his shields are going to be crazy good in a Simulated Universe. I think that could be very, very, very helpful for people for getting through. I think he's going to be very strong there. I do. But look, yeah, there you go. I think Aventurine, he's looking to be a great choice. Honestly, the preservation units seem a bit overpowered. I wonder what's going to happen in the future. Like, they do seem to release a lot of gear sets in this game that are pretty powerful. Like, I just, I'm still very much working on my gear, but like, we just got a nice, switched up our boy. His crit values are still terrible. I know, we're getting there, right? But like with the relics, like we just got this, like the Sigonia's Gaiathra birth. The Sigonia Gaiathra, like the Aventurine themed set, which is cool. But that's really powerful for like AoE, where you get 4% crit damage stacking up. Like really, they tend to do these really powerful gear sets very regularly. I actually got these both from the 300% event, which is really nice. Slap them on my boy Jing Yuan. I could easily see them doing something funky in the future, where it's like excess healing gets turned into shields, like a mini shield or something like that, or maybe excess shielding, or like shields that expire turn into healing. Like shields that expire, Aventurines don't really expire, so he wouldn't get any healing. That could be a bummer. Whereas like excess healing, all of the healers can do a ton of excess healing. Getting a small shield from that would make the abundance characters way stronger, for instance. So who knows? They might do that in the future. I wouldn't be shocked. And that could be an interesting twist. Or of course, we've always got the possibility of like a damage dealer of some sort that does a little bit of healing for your team, which would be great for the shielders, or a damage dealer that does a little bit of shielding for your team, which would be great for the abundance. Like that sort of stuff could happen as well. So like slight cross-roll hero. We'll see. But I certainly, look, right now, Aventurine, he's going to be a fantastic choice from the gameplay that we've seen. He looks super duper strong, really good with follow-up type teams like this. So yeah, I think he combos super well with your Doctor Ratio. He's cool. Yeah, Aventurine, I think he's a solid choice. I'm going for him. So stay tuned. I will do my polls in the next few days. Probably next day or two. As soon as it goes live, I'll probably be straight on to record and do my polls. So wish me the best of luck. Hopefully we get him straight away. And if not, hopefully we get someone cool from our 50-50. Hopefully not another well, I don't know. We could use another Bailu. Frickin' hell. Like I've got Bronya, which is great. And I've got an E1 Bailu. I'd kind of, just for the sake of, I like the variety, I'd like another new character. But hey, we take an E2 Bailu, I suppose. It'd be decent, it'd be solid, but a vertical progression. We'll see. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. Goodbye.